So one of the things that I've learned from studying the Bible is how the people who were inspired by God to write it, oftentimes when they've had an experience with God that just can't be imagined or understood by anything that we know from our life around us, they try to take things that we do know and say, well, it's sort of like, which means it's not really that, but it's trying to give a picture. It's trying to give us a sense of what they've experienced when they were in the presence of God. And so I was trying to think of like, well, how do I describe joy? And because we've been busy putting up pictures in our house, and I saw our wedding picture, that reminded me of, well, there was the day that Cindy and I got married, and that wow experience I had when I was standing up there. I'd been standing up there with, my best man and the pastor, and killing time waiting for Cindy to finally get there and be ready to come down the aisle. But there was a certain point where, flower girls and maids of honor and everything came down. And then finally I could see Cindy in her wedding dress. And it was like one of these wow experiences to see her like that. And so the wedding picture shows me in a tux and Cindy in the wedding dress. We've reached a point in our life now when we look at the picture, we go, so who are those people? Do you have any idea who they are? I feel like I used to know them at one point in my life, but I'm not quite sure. I don't know them anymore because they're not us. But the other thing that has given me some joy, which, those of you who know me well enough that any time that I can be completely ridiculous, that's one of those moments that gives me joy. So when we were still living down in Cornish, the wedding picture was hanging up in the family room just to the left of the TV. And this mother of a boy who was part of the youth group was sitting in the family room and talking to me. And she looks up there and she goes, "Oh, is that your wedding picture?" And I go, "Well, that was when I married my first wife." And she's doing, "What about Cindy?" I go, "Oh, she's my trophy wife." And the poor woman was even more confused after I said all of that. So that gives me great delight to be able to say things that nobody would ever expect somebody to ever say at all. Are you catching this, Paul? Yeah, you're going to start? What about you, Kenny? You're holding on to this? Someday, some unsuspecting person is going to be there, and you can pull it out, and you can say, no, this is perfectly spiritually okay, because my pastor said it as an opening sermon illustration. It's been ordained by God. I can say this. So, anyway, how do you go on from there? So it's good news of great joy, which happens to be what the title of the message is today. And the key question is, if Christmas is about joy, why do so many people get depressed? Have you ever thought about that? I can remember I was still in my very early 20s, and I heard that Christmas is one of the most depressing times of the year for lots and lots of people. And I'm like, depressing? Why? You got all the great Christmas carols. It's like everything about Christmas, produces joy, or at least it's supposed to. Why do people get so depressed? So our key idea is that Christmas isn't about family and stuff. It's about peace from God. And that really gets to the heart of why so many people get depressed at a time when it's supposed to be filled with joy, because they've set their priority not on God and the things of God. They've set it on things of this world, things that many of them don't have and can't have. And they're no longer looking to God, and they're no longer finding joy in the life that they're living. So why does it matter? Because the world's focus is empty and disappointing. But the good news of the Messiah produces joy. That's why it matters. And that's what we actually can bring to people at this time of year. If they're saying, grumble, grumble, I don't like Christmas. Well, why is it you don't like Christmas? Is it because you're not talking to your family? Is it because your family is all passed on? Is it because, everything about Christmas is related to these things of the world? Because it's supposed to be all about the things of God, not about the things of this world. So our sermon passage is Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 20, on page question mark, because I still haven't gotten a copy of the Pew Bible down at my desk at my office at home. So these are things that I don't know the answer to. What's that? No, that's the hymnal. You won't find it there. You might find a new song to sing, but you won't find the sermon passage there. Okay. Actually, I have actually put one with my what's that? 724. So if you want to look in there for the NIV version of this. So we start off here, and we're going to be getting some context. And I just did a little bit of study this week because I had heard that the third candle, the pink candle, is known as the shepherd's candle. Yeah, I didn't know that. I also didn't know that the whole concept of, the concept of Advent predates, but the concept of the Advent wreath with the lighting of the candles was started in 1839. So that's when it actually got started. And it was started by somebody who was in Germany leading a mission to children, and he was wanting to find a way to explain things to the children. So he came up with this idea of basically every day of Advent leading up to Christmas, so that there was something every single day that the kids would learn about it. Well, of course, as is always the case in our world, that was too complex and unwieldy for people. So it was reduced down to the 4 weeks of Advent, with the fifth candle being the white candle, the Christ candle, which normally is when Christmas falls on a Sunday. Then you have 4 weeks before then, and then the fifth Sunday is the fifth week of Advent. We usually light it when we have our Christmas Eve service. So that's kind of the history of Advent as far as that goes. So the shepherd's candle. So I thought, well, okay, so this passage in Luke chapter 2, which is all about the shepherds, it seems to fit for Advent week 3. So it starts off and it says, that night there were shepherds staying in their fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of the Lord's glory surrounded them, and they were terrified. But the angel reassured them. Don't be afraid, he said. I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all the people. So I've already told you about the shepherd's candle and what that has to do with, and the fact that it's about joy. In the previous slide, it talked about the radiance of God's glory. And I just can't imagine what it would have been like for the shepherds hanging out in a field with just sheep. And just thought of a bad joke, which is later on in the passage when they, I have to tell it because I'm going to die laughing. Because the shepherds go off to find the baby Jesus. And what do you think they said? I'll be back. Glad I got that done. So anyway, they're seeing the radiance of the Lord, and it stops them dead in their tracks. They don't know what to do. They've always been told that, if you're in the presence of God, you'll die. This isn't something that you look forward to. And that's a shame, because back in the garden, Adam and Eve were in the presence of the Lord on a very regular basis. That was something that they had a chance to look forward to. And we've gotten to the point where even amongst some Protestants, there's this idea that you don't want to get too excited, you don't want to get too emotional, you don't want to get too carried away with being in the presence of God. You don't want to do that. And yet, it was the radiance of the glory of God that was a part of this message that the angel gives, that he says, I bring you good news of great joy. That's what's part of it. The radiance of God was mixed in with the message. And so that's a really important thing. And so this is a God sighting. So therefore, this message is going in the direction of God sightings. Because when we get down to the last few verses of the passage, it's going to be giving us some clues as to what a God sighting, how we should react to it, how we should handle it, how it should be a part of our lives, and how we should share it with others. So next comes this prophetic message. The Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David. And you will recognize him by this sign. You will find a baby wrapped snugly in strips of cloth, lying in a manger. So this was a very big deal. The fact that a sign would be a proof that that this message from this angel was true. It wasn't, some charlatan scam sort of a thing. It wasn't some TV preacher who was promising something that wasn't going to deliver on it. They were saying that no, that this really was going to happen. And having the sign is important, because asking God for confirmation is okay. God never has a problem with you wanting to have him confirm the message that you believe that he's giving to you. Certainly the enemy will try to give you messages which kind of sound sort of maybe spiritual. They're put in a Christianized, suit of clothing, and they look maybe possibly godly, but it's not from God. We live in a world where this is a concern that we should have. So wanting confirmation is never a problem. To be able to say, God, okay, if I believe that this could be true. I believe that this could be real. I believe that this is something that you can do. I'm willing to believe that nothing is beyond you. What I want to know is, am I hearing this message correctly? Am I getting a message from you? Or is somebody just trying to scam me on something? That's all I need to know. Because if it's you, I'm on board completely. I'm all in. I'm pedal to the metal, ready to go and do whatever you want me to do. I just need to know that it's you. Disbelief is bad. That's one of the things that happened with the father of John the Baptist. Because he thought, well, my wife and I are too old. We couldn't possibly have children. This is ridiculous. It'll never happen. He had complete disbelief. Mary, on the other hand, when the angel came to her, Mary was like, well, how is this going to happen? It wasn't, this can't happen. I'm not married. I'm still a virgin. It can't happen. It was like, well, I know how these things are supposed to happen. How is it going to happen in this case? She wanted confirmation. She didn't have doubts. And that's exactly the way you and I should live. We need to have confirmation. We shouldn't have doubts. We can look at something and say, yep, I completely believe that God is capable of doing whatever it is that's being talked about. Now, I need to have it confirmed that this is the message that's coming from God. That's what I need, confirmation. So here, they're being told that there's going to be this sign so that they will know that this message is true. Suddenly the angel was joined by a vast host of others, the armies of heaven, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, peace on earth to those with whom God is pleased." Keep in mind, this is not the sign. Remember, the sign was you're going to find the baby. This is just kind of like the next step of the confirmation. The next step was, the armies of heaven. That's pretty overwhelming. I mean, they've already seen the radiance of God's glory and have been terrified. Now they've been told that there's going to be a sign. They have this heavenly choir, which is singing to them. And they have this response. That's the one where my bad joke, you fill in the bad joke there. When the angels had returned to heaven, the shepherds said to each other, "Let's go to Bethlehem. Let's see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." They hurried to the village and found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in the manger. So they find the manger. They find the baby. They see the sign. The message is confirmed. This is what happened to them. Pretty amazing stuff. But what happens next? After seeing him, the shepherds told everyone what had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. They told everyone. It's a message of joy. They're excited. They can't hold it back. I mean, nobody told them to hold it back, but even if they had been told to not say anything, they wouldn't have been able to. It would have been like, when you give a 3-year-old a secret. Shh, don't tell anybody. And they go up to the first person, they go, "I'm not supposed to tell you." And then they tell you what they're not supposed to tell you. And then they go up to the next person. This is what it means to have a God sighting. It's to be that excited, to be that innocent, to be to this point where you just have to talk about it. You can't hold it back. They told everyone about what they had seen. So this is a mission of joy, but it is a mission that does actually have a purpose. It's a purpose so that people can actually know what God has done. Getting the report from somebody who is an eyewitness to something carries a lot of weight with other people. When you have had an experience, when God has shown himself to you, when God has confirmed a message to you, and you know that it's absolutely true and it's absolutely from God, you're on a mission at that point. You're on a mission to share your joy, but to share your joy so that another person or other people can know that God is real, that God is present, and that the joy that God has given you is joy that God wants to give them as well. You're on a mission. So when we get to the time of the God sighting, that's when you need to be ready to talk about the things that God has talked to you about, that God has confirmed that you know are absolutely true. That's the time to be able to do that. Why? All who heard the shepherd's story were astonished. They were amazed. They were marveling at this report that they were getting. In other words, the things that the shepherds were saying were having an impact on people. That's what the purpose of sharing a God sighting is all about. It's about having an impact on somebody else. You have no control over what that impact is going to be like. You have no control whether somebody is going to look at you and go, "Whoa," or they're going to go, "Yeah, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." You have no control over that. And you don't have to. Because that's between them and God. It's not that between them and you. They might try to express it as if it's between them and you, but it's really not. You're sharing what they have, what you've been through. You're having an impact one way or the other. Because God wants you to have an impact on others. just as God wanted these shepherds. What are shepherds? I mean, these are guys who hang out in fields all the time. How often do they ever get to bathe? How often do they ever get to go to the temple? By the religious leaders, they were unclean. They had no right to do anything like that. These were shepherds. What? God would want a shepherd to have an impact on others for the gospel of Jesus Christ? God would actually want that? The religious leaders would never have believed that. They would have thought that was completely preposterous. And so, I want you to stop and think for a moment how much like, based on the people who think there's something special, based on all of the people who think that they have exalted status in our world, how much like a shepherd are you to them? How humble and insignificant and unimportant and unworthy of their time and trouble are you to them? You're a shepherd. And God values you as much as he valued the shepherds. So, when we get to the God-sighting time, if you're thinking, well, I don't have anything important, nobody's going to want to listen to what I have to say, don't worry about it. If you're important to God, and God felt it was important enough to be present with you and to let you have this experience, then it's important. What others think is really not that important. You just need to remember that you are as important to God as the shepherds were. In the world that they live in, they were not considered important. In the world that you live in, you are probably not considered that important. But it doesn't matter. Because in the eyes of God, you matter. And if you are getting your satisfaction and your meaning and your purpose and your mission in life from the God who made you, for the God who says that you matter, for the God who cares about you, if you're getting it from God, then it matters. And you never know when you share what God has been doing in your life, how it's going to amaze somebody else, how they're going to marvel, how it's going to impact them. But Mary kept all of these things in her heart and thought about them often. It meant that at the moment that it was happening, and I don't know, I know I've been in this experience, and I'm pretty sure everybody else has been too. When first you have this experience and you wonder, God, what are you doing and why? Why am I included in this? What's going on? To say, Lord, I just don't understand. And I'm pretty sure that Mary did not understand why God wanted Jesus to be born through her. Why did he pick her of all the people? Why did she have the experience? Why did she end up being visited by those wise men? Why did the shepherds come to see her? Why did all of this happen? What was the whole point of it? Because she pondered about this. She thought deeply about this. She spent time talking to God about this and saying, explain to me. Help me to understand this. I wonder how long it took before it fully started to make sense to her. Did it finally make sense when Jesus was on the cross? Did it make sense at the resurrection? At what point did it start to make sense to her? We don't know. But what we do know from this account is that she wanted to understand what God was doing and how God was including her in this. So therefore, this becomes part of how you deal with things. You can be like the shepherds and say, I just had this amazing experience. I was told that this was going to happen. God confirmed it for me. I went, I saw it. It happened as God said it was going to happen. I'm excited about it. If somebody says, why did it happen? Well, I don't know. I guess God wanted it to happen. I don't know why. We don't have to understand what God is doing or why to be able to be obedient, to be able to be willing to listen, to be able to do what God is asking us to do. We can obey without understanding. The understanding can come later. Just so happens that the mother of that I had the whole Cindy marriage story to, her daughter was in youth group, and her daughter went off to college, and I saw her, on one of her visits home from college, and what was interesting to me was that she was now at a new phase in her life, and her understanding of God was in the process of changing. And she described it as, because she had a little handbag, with a strap around her neck, and it was like when she was in youth group, she had all of her God stuff tucked in the handbag. That was the way she described it. And everything was good because she had it all tucked right here. And then she gets off in school, and she's seeing life, and it's like things aren't making sense. She's not always making decisions that she can be proud of. And so now she's having to rethink her understanding of who God is and what her relationship to him is. This is very, very common, that we go through life and we think we understand something, and we go a little bit further and we found out that we didn't understand what we thought we understood. And we learn more and we go, okay, I can remember being young and saying, okay, now I finally understand. I don't know how many times I got to that point where, where God was concerned. It's like, okay, finally, Lord, now I understand. I got to a certain point, it's like, you know what? I'm not going to say now I understand, because I keep finding out that I don't really understand. I understand more, but that doesn't mean I understand what I really need to understand. So it's very possible to live a life where you are filled with joy and excitement and enthusiasm and a willingness to obey once things have been confirmed, and then to spend years, decades of your life coming to a place where you come back to thinking about something that happened and you go, oh, I understand a little bit more now, because you've now shown me something else that you knew was going to happen that I need to be prepared for. I was told once, when I'd been through a really difficult spiritual time of turmoil and struggle, and my pastor told me, he goes, I have a strong feeling that God is in the process of preparing you for even worse than this. Well, gee, thanks a lot. That's what I really wanted to hear. Sadly, he was right. I experienced worse than that a few years later. But that's the way it goes. We have certain experiences, we come to think we understand it, and then we go through another experience, and the new experience, because of the previous experience, we're able to handle it better. Because the first time, if we had been through that thing that came later, if that had been the first time, we would have been totally laid on the floor. It would have been horrible. To be like Mary and to think deeply and to ponder something should be a normal part of the Christian life. It shouldn't get in the way of obedience. It shouldn't get in the way of excitement and joy and enthusiasm. It shouldn't get in the way. But it is a part of it. And you need to see it as a part of your life, that you may not understand, and somewhere down the road you're going to understand more. A little bit further on down the road you're going to understand even more, and it's going to keep going all through your life. It never stops. So then the shepherds went back to their flocks. The thing that really struck me about this was that God allowed them to momentarily leave their very ordinary, simple life and to go out and find the baby Jesus and to be able to report this to people and to have an impact on them. But then he returns them back to a very simple life. They don't stay living in this state of constant excitement, overstimulation. They don't live that way. None of us should live that way. None of us should want to live that way. Too much stimulation, it wears you out. We're not built for that. So when I see this here, it begs the question, are you content with your simple life? Are you content after you've had this experience that you can share? Are you content to go back to something which you've been doing, which you understand, which makes sense? Are you willing to go back to that and be content with that? Are you content to not have all of this super excitement? And when they went back to their flocks, they were glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen. It was just as the angel had told them. So they were honoring and they were celebrating God. That's what the glorifying and the praising was. When they went back to their simple life, they were changed because now they were living a life where they were also honoring and celebrating God. They had that one experience, and from that one experience, they were prepared to now honor and celebrate God. And so when we get to the time of the service, which is called God sighting, that is a time when you can celebrate and honor God by sharing the experience that you have had. And in so doing, you will be a blessing to God. We don't always think of ourselves. We want God to bless us. But we don't always stop and think that we actually have opportunities to bless God. And that's certainly a time where you can bless God. So what's our truth nugget? The God story is amazing. That's the whole truth nugget. It's an amazing story. And I would say that your personal God story is amazing too. If you're thinking, well, yeah, but I haven't actually had, heaven's army show up and, seen the radiance of God's glory and, I haven't had anything like that. We tend to think that we have to have that in order to have a story. But that misses the point. This was a very specific happening because of something specific God was doing. God was having his son be born as a human. He was having his son come to be God with us. That was a big deal. So it was very specific what he was having here. He's already done that. He doesn't need to do that again. So therefore, your experiences might not look exactly like what the shepherds experienced. And that's okay. Don't downplay and go, yeah, my story isn't worth sharing. Don't think of it that way. Your story is your story. Your experience with God is your experience with God. It's not anybody else's experience with God. It's your experience with God. And for somebody who does not know who God is and has no opportunity to hear about God, has never had an opportunity, who has been sold hook, line, and sinker into the world's idea of what Christmas is. It's stuff. It's being surrounded by people and stuff. Just lots of stuff. More stuff. More stuff and stuffing with stuff. For people for whom that's the only thing that they know about Christmas, they don't know your story. They might have heard the story that I've just recounted, but that's like way far off, long ago, far away. But your story is here. It's now. It's the life we're living today. God didn't just show up thousands of years ago. God keeps showing up. And he's showing up in my life and in your life and in all of our lives. Our story with God is amazing. Our story with God can impact people. Because now it's no longer storybook stories. Now it's just real life, everyday history. It's history in the making. And that means something to people. People want to know, well, why are you filled with joy? Why do you have joy? It doesn't make any sense to me. But when they hear your story, and they hear another person's story, and another person's story, those stories start to add up. It starts to make a difference. Because God's story coming through you is amazing. So takeaway number one. This is where you start off and you're praying to God and you say, Lord, help me to be aware of your presence. This is probably the hardest thing, is to be aware of God's presence. Some people they just never notice. I had this incident with somebody that I know, and they were telling me, and I can't even recount all of the stories, but one of them included a car rolling over onto somebody into a snowbank, and the people who were there trying to rock it off of him, and they go, you don't want to do that because you'll crush him. He stopped, and he knew something about the physics of what they were doing. And so he was able to, get it to a certain position, and they were able to drag the person out from underneath, and wasn't too badly hurt. That much I can tell. He had a list of stories to tell me. He goes, why is it that God keeps seeming to having me arrive at situations like this? And he told another, and he told another, and he told another. And I said, that's because God is present and active in your life. You just haven't learned to notice it and to give him the credit for it. What you're telling me, you're sharing with me a lifetime of God sightings. He comes from a very buttoned-down Christian background, so I'm not sure whether he would be willing to stand up if he were in this church and share a God sighting. But the list of them, the list of things that had happened in his life where God was present and God doing stuff, where God was using whatever special knowledge he had, and what a difference it made. It was absolutely astounding to me. I have not run into too many people who have had that many stories that they could share. And as he was sharing one, it brought back another one to his mind. And, we sat there for like an hour and a half, and he was sharing one story after another. So this is why it's important for you to be asking God to help you to become aware of when he is present in your life. Not so that you can just see it after the fact, because after the fact is good. It's even better if you can kind of notice it while you're in the middle of it. That's an amazing thing. Ask God to help you with that. Takeaway 2. Then ask God, help you to understand what he's doing and why. It's one thing to say, God was with me, and I felt his presence, and I know he was there, and he confirmed it, and I've got this. But now, as you go through life, allow yourself to go back and revisit and say, okay, God, so what exactly was that all about? Why did you have me experience that? Why did you pick on me? Why was I given the opportunity to see this and to experience this? What mission do you actually have me on? Are you preparing me for the future? Or do you just want me to talk to everybody that I see about it? And maybe it's both. But you're not going to know if you don't ask God. You want God to make you aware that he's there and doing things, and then you want God to give you understanding about what you've experienced. And who knows? You may end up being old, sitting in a rocking chair, and finally able to go, light bulb moment, and you can tell your grandkids, when I was young, God did this. I never understood, but I just figured it out. Now I know. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether God gives you an answer now or whether God makes you wait 50, 60 years. If you ask him, at some point, he's going to fill you in and tell you why he had you go through that experience. And he's going to want you to share it because it's going to make a difference for somebody. Somebody else is going to be amazed. Somebody else is going to understand the truth about God just because you shared a simple, humble story that may not be as great as what the shepherds went through, but it's your story, and that makes it great.